Janhavi is the author of the novel Wanderers All, a collection of short stories, Window Seat, Rasha Stories from the City and the Travel Guide, Moon, Mumbai and Goa. The first Indian destination guide by the American travel book series Moon Handbooks. A writer of both fiction and travel, she is a contributing editor at Condé Nast Traveller India. She was awarded the Charles Wallace Visiting Writers Fellowship at the University of Stirling, Scotland. We met Zach yesterday in this room, and in addition to being the author of popular comic thrillers which have the hero Hari Majestic, he is also a travel writer, frequently contributing to the National Geographic Traveller magazine and the Hindu Business Line. He also has an immense sense of humor, so stay tuned. And finally, Anuradha Goyal. She's the author of the best-selling book, The Mouse Charmers, Digital Pioneers of India, that documents the business biographies of pioneering digital companies of India. She authors the award-winning travel blog, Indie Tales, and writes a travel column, Stories from the Road, for Navdin Times. Her book reviews blog, Anu Reviews, has over 500 books reviewed across genres, and it finds a place in the Limca Book of Records for being the largest book reviews blog of India. She moved to Goa 2 years ago, and we were just exchanging notes on what it is like to shifting to Goa. Over to the three of you to take this forward.
Good afternoon. Since we are a small audience, we keep it extremely interactive. I'll start with myself. I'm an accidental writer. I studied computer science, worked in IT industry, and one fine day, while experimenting, I ended up writing a blog, which my readers liked, and they came back to me. I went back to them, and in this back and forth, 10 years down the line, my identity became that of a travel blogger. So I call myself an accidental writer. And then when I looked at a lot of travel writers around me, I figured out being a travel writer is not really a career option that most people grow up with. Most people actually become travel writers either for the sheer passion of travel or the sheer passion of writing or a combination of both of them. So I'm keen to know how two of you came into travel writing.
Shouldn't we have the ladies first?
Since you are minority, we'll start with you.
Oh, yeah. The poor white people.
I thought, okay, I didn't think of that. That's another minority. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Which minority are you thinking of?
You are with two women and
yeah, male gender. Yeah, the new minority is the male gender.
Yeah.
I was just thinking like the other day, like these days I do a lot of my travel writing on this thing, my phone. Like my latest story, I wrote most of it on this one, and then I edited it on a larger laptop. And then I was just remembering how I started out as a travel writer about a quarter century ago. And I was traveling around India and doing like this very ambitious travel guide book to India, which was my first book project. And I was carrying around this typewriter, like 3-4 kgs. Do you remember typewriters? I mean, like before laptops, there were these things with keys you had to do to get something out of it.
And you couldn't make any mistakes.
Yeah, well, there was this sort of Tipex or whatever thing you could delete things, but like there was no spell checker or all these kind of things, but you had to know what you were writing about. So I was carrying around this thing around India for like 2 years, working on the material for my book. There was like no, like with these things you can upload your stuff, as a backup every day, and so even if the thing gets stolen or falls into the ocean here in Goa or falls into a cup of Fenny and gets destroyed, your material will be on some cloud or some server or something like that. And in those days, like one would have to Xerox one's whatever one wrote regularly and send it to the publisher and just pray that the postal service wouldn't like lose it on the way, and just pray that your publisher would keep it there and it would be there for you when you return back to write your book. So, and I think travel writing has changed a lot since those days, really, because like nowadays you have these rubbish websites like TripAdvisor. I don't know if you've heard of it, but like all these idiots who they go to some restaurant and they wait for like 30 minutes to get their food, and then they feel that they should write a complaint on TripAdvisor. And like I would like, if I go to a restaurant and food comes faster than 30 minutes, I'd be really suspicious about eating that. And there are other people, other reviews are totally rigged. Like so like the difference is like in these days, like there's all this unedited material all over the net that is circulated and passes off as travel writing. I mean, I don't want to totally pull down TripAdvisor. I mean, I'm sure there's one or two good things about it, but generally, like in those days, we were working with these publishing houses, and in those days there was no internet. Nobody could Google about places in India. Suppose somebody from Sweden, my original native, now I live in India, but in those days I was living in Sweden. So suppose somebody from there wanted to travel to India, they really had to go to a library to borrow a book or read some printed material, well-edited material that would inform them about like interesting places to go, interesting things to see. And nowadays, like travel writing has become this sort of unassorted type of tamasha situation, like where when you Google on something, it's you get all kinds of. I mean, it's very hard to make sense of places. So I think like a travel writer even today has like an important role to play, even though like the media situation has changed. The publishing situation has changed a lot in the years since the internet came about. Because like in my travel writing, after this epic tour with my typewriter, I mean, I've written a few travel guidebooks to India and United States and other things. And then I went through a very tragic phase when I was working for some high-profile travel magazines that wanted me to review luxury hotels, because that from the shoestring traveling that was originally happening, and where you would find like cheap best options for travelers to stay and those kind of things. Suddenly you had to write about luxury hotels, and obviously like a travel magazine can't pay for hotel room that costs like 1 lakh rupees per night. So I was doing a lot of those things in like about 10 years ago, flying around the world, reviewing luxury hotels and restaurants of that kind. And the hotels would then sponsor the trips, because the travel magazine can't pay 1 lakh rupees per night. So the hotel would know that you're coming as a travel writer to write about it. And then when you enter the room, like these glorious suites, there would be all kinds of champagne bottles hidden all over the place to get you into a good mood. And as a travel writer, at that point I had like one particular moment when I started to feel slightly that there's something going wrong with this travel writing business. And there was like these champagne bottles that I was finding all over the room, and I would drink up each bottle, and there was a jacuzzi, and I would sit in the jacuzzi and drink the last bottles, and I fell asleep, and I was sleeping in this nice huge bed which was like more or less bigger than any of the hotel rooms I used to stay in when I was traveling on this shoestring budget in my early travel writing days. So I was sleeping in this huge bed, and then I started feeling like I need to do susu because all of this champagne, And so I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't find a toilet because I've been staying in so many luxury hotel rooms, and in the very poshest places they kind of hide away the toilet also in some panel behind some wall, and you need to go to the secret thing to press to find a room. So ultimately I ended up pissing in my own shoe. near the door. And I sort of woke up like at 3 a.m., drunk from all this champagne. I was looking and I was urinating in my own shoe, and I was thinking, I have to kind of change my approach to travel writing and get away from this commercial travel writing thing. So nowadays, like, I'm more or less, and my latest travel stories have really been about finding the places that are not written about, you know? Like, and their internet is a very interesting tool, because if I think of a destination, some place that interests me, and if I Google on it and I don't get many hits, or just like nobody has written or published anything on that place, then I start thinking, oh, that would be a very interesting place to go to. Like, some of my latest stories have been about Dharwad, a place in Karnataka. I wrote about for Outlook Traveler, which is not very far from here. And Tellicherry, a small town in North Kerala, which is like one of the like Dharwad is a cultural hub. Like, it's not very that well known, but it's like known for like Hindustani classical music, and is known for literature and poetry. And there's a saying in Dharwad: if you throw a stone over your shoulder, it'll hit a poet. And Tellicherry in Kerala is a place that is like one of the biggest producers of mussels, like this shellfish, and a kind of gourmet destination that is not very well known about. And if you Google on it, there's very few stories about it. So I go to those kind of places nowadays. I look online and see if much has been written about it. If nothing or much significant has been written about it, then I would love to go to that place. And I nowadays, so I started to look at the targets to write about from that point of view. And the nice thing is that, like, I mean, earlier I would get all these like hundreds of champagne bottles hidden in my room. Nowadays, nobody gives me champagne bottles, but I get like a lot of feedback through email and people who contact me and who are like happy that, oh, finally somebody wrote about Dharwad, like a long story about Dharwad, or Kerala is my native place. I love you, Zach, for having come to my native place and written about it. You know? So those kind of things is really the most gratifying thing. And so this is like my journey. I've gone from the backpacking to the corporate luxury and finally arrived at looking for the forgotten places to write about. And that is what I think is the future of travel writing, and what we professionals need to do.
Great. Janhavi.
Although I did start writing on the typewriter as well, by the time I got into travel writing, there was email. So I didn't fortunately have to carry my typewriter around like you did. But I think I was a traveler well before I became a writer. And I would go to these strange sort of places, use really weird modes of transport, because I mean I was young, I had no money and I wanted to travel. I would con friends into joining me, and they didn't know quite what to expect. And there was one trip like that where I asked them if they would join me, come with me to Mandu. And it was a fairly long, winded trip from Bombay. You had to take a bus, like a regular bus from near VT station, which would take you to Indore, Dhar, and then from Dhar and Mau you had to take the local bus to Mandu. And there was just government accommodation there, and it was really, for me, a very interesting trip, because you were traveling by bus next to villages. The bus was so packed, it was unimaginable, and yet they were very accommodating. It didn't matter that we had luggage, and someone had a rooster on his shoulder, someone was traveling with a goat, and it was a very interesting trip. And someone heard about it and asked if I would, and I was writing at that time, so they asked if I would write it for Man's World, the magazine. So that was actually, I think, possibly my first travel article, the one on Mandu. And after that, I mean, there were no travel magazines, magazines dedicated to travel as such. So I started writing for, jet wings, and they would say whenever you go on one of your interesting trips, come back and write about it. So so that's how it started, and then of course then the magazines came, and there was Outlook Traveler. So they sent me on a very wonderful wine trail, because Nasik had just sort of was sort of known for its wine, and there were lots of wineries, and it was a very strange and bizarre experience, because I was obviously, drinking through the day, starting at 8 in the morning. Your notes are not going to be terribly coherent, and so also, there were farmers. They're basically originally grape farmers who realized that they could make wine. They had the money but not the education. So they got French winemakers, and so it was a very interesting interaction I was having. I was sitting with farmers and having lasuni, methi, and bhakri, which is the local roti, with wine, which was also in some places being sort of made in a, they were getting the combination right in the lab. So I was like, can you please not give it to me in a test tube? I mean, I'd really like a wine glass, or any glass, not a wine glass. So those were very interesting days. And then I was commissioned by Moon Handbooks, this American publisher. They were looking for an Indian travel writer, because luckily, unlike a lot of other publications, they wanted someone who was a local and who could write about a country and who came from a space of knowledge about the country rather than, as a tourist. So, so that was an incredibly, it was a great learning experience for me, because you had to do your own admin. I mean, you would know that, having written a travel guide, because you don't have, the luxury that you have in a travel magazine where someone sort of, makes all the arrangements, they book the hotel, they, arrange for transport, and you just land there, you experience it, you come back and you write about it. It's a luxury. But here you have to sort of, write to people, do stuff anonymously, and yet also within your budget. So that was very interesting, and also because there was a clause in my contract which said that if I didn't deliver my manuscript in time, then they would sue me. And America and being sued, so I think that was a sword dangling over my head, because every time I think as I was traveling, I was thinking of the deadline and of languishing in some jail in America. I felt.
So that would have been the easiest way to get into America visa.
Yeah, I'm not sure like that very much. So it's been a journey, and now of course things have changed, like you said, so drastically, where nothing is new. So in fact, I think it was Benedict Allen who said that the era of the grand continental voyages has gone, and now all you can do is a well-traveled place. If you travel again, and he says in the right way, you can interpret it anew. But I have a problem with saying the right way, because I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. It's just about doing it differently or in your own way. But basically, it's about interpretation. How you interpret a place that has already that people are already familiar with or have access to easily.
Also, it's become more like destination focused, I feel. Don't you think? Like earlier, travel writing was often about the journey to get to a place, and the road that you travel, and like you said that about those goats and roosters on your bus and things like that. Whereas now it's all about like highlighting the destination. What are the like luxury hotels there? What are the things there? The restaurants and so on.
But again, here I must sort of, although I never was a luxury sort of traveler, and of course now I'm contributing editor with Condé Nast Traveler, which is a luxury magazine, and that itself has been a learning experience, because I've always thought of, and in most cases luxury hotels, it's one luxury hotel is similar to another, and you could be in any country. It doesn't matter. The feel of the place is from where you stay, partly. So, but at the same time, you have very interesting places which are, these boutique properties, which really sort of imbibe the sense of the place. A lot of heritage properties, which are luxury properties, but they, the history behind them is also very interesting. So.
Like
Also-
the Neemrana group in India.
There's also a new property called Swathma in Thanjavur, which is an old property which they sort of built around a heritage house. Or I think a lot of places have Havelis in Rajasthan, for example.
So in fact, what we are saying is not just destination, it is the properties which are becoming a destination
In itself,
in
yeah.
itself.
And you don't actually have to leave the property. Because
Yeah, so those properties are designed in a way that you should come here and just stay and not go out, kind of place. Okay, so that leads to another question. Today everybody is a traveler. Everybody with a smartphone is a traveler. They take pictures, they post it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They are documenting their journeys in whatever sense we can say. If everybody is a traveler, where does that leave the travel writer? So how do you differentiate yourself from somebody who's a casual content creator, for the lack of a better word, who's creating content in a very raw but a very usable form? So how does a travel writer differentiate himself or herself from this person?
So I think travel writing as such has always historically changed from time to time, because it started really with from a Western perspective, the colonial conquests. So that was very different writing, where they would romanticize the place. They knew for sure that nobody else had traveled, so they would make up a lot of stuff. There was no way of verifying anything. Then it changed when the travel guides came in. For the budget traveler and backpackers during the hippie era and things like that. So I think it's always been in a state of flux. I think right now the challenge would be to sort of reinterpret the place, because there are very few places now which are not discovered. In that sense, because everyone's an armchair traveler. You can visit a place sitting at home. You have the the internet. But I think what is important is that you need to be a traveling storyteller, because it's the stories, and it's like what, for example, what Paul Theroux did. He changed travel writing because he made it more experiential. He made it about people. It wasn't just about the sights. It wasn't about the destination. It was just the whole experience of travel, the whole journey. So similarly, to take different aspects and sort of open new windows and make someone sort of see things afresh, saying, oh, I hadn't noticed that about this place. I think that would be perfect.
Yeah, and I would agree with this thing about storytelling, and it's a very important aspect of it. Like, I myself, I like to read travel blogs and travel stories posted online by people who just travel for the fun of it and tell like what they ate and how they got from there to there and all these kind of things. And I do enjoy those stories, but often they're missing the narrative part, like the storytelling part. And what we who are like professional travel writers, we try to do is often like we go to a place and try to look for a story to tell about that place, rather than tell about like what we did. That we don't write like I went there, I did this, I saw that, and then something. But one is looking for what story a place can tell. So and that is a very it has to do with the sort of professional approach you take to like visiting places. And like when I go to any place, one of the first things I do is I avoid taking taxis or drive around in vehicles, but I just go on walking in the streets. I walk like in around one block, then I walk like a larger circle around that block, and then an even bigger circle around that area, and try to kind of walk like every street I can walk in that city, just to see what is there around me and see like what kind of places are there, and if there's some interesting people one can chat up, or interesting places one can drop into that are not necessarily part of some tourist agenda that you're supposed to do in a place, but that are places that can be interesting to talk about. So one is sort of looking for this story that then can be translated or converted into an interesting narrative, and the reader of the magazine one is working for, or the book one is writing, that can that will be like an interesting reading experience for readers. So it's not really about like me traveling and going to that places, but it's about me telling the story of that place, or the peculiar things that you can experience in that place for the readers to enjoy, if you know what I mean.
And I also feel that as a professional traveler, your sense of observation is far bigger. So you observe far more than a casual traveler who travels.
Well, it gets honed over time, because since one has obviously slept in about 2 million hotels, eaten in 3 million restaurants. I mean, look at my stomach now. I put on so much weight over all these years, and one has drank every possible beverage that is available. I had a really nice experience yesterday. One of the I mean, I'm not here to do a travel story, but I did a bit of a walk outside this compound just to sort of look at the neighboring area of Dona Paula and things like that. So I walked a few kilometers away from this beautiful center, but just to get away from this beauty of this center for a moment. And I came to, like, there was like and I felt a little bit thirsty, and then there was this dive, I mean like a local bar, like not like an unpleasant looking place. And I just stepped in, and the proprietor saw that I was a foreigner, and he started doing rattling off like Carlsberg, Tuborg, Heineken, fish, prawn, chicken and all. And then I told him, like, give me chona and kaju. And he stopped, went quiet for 3 seconds, and then looked at me, sir, are you Goan? So as a travel writer, you try to kind of insinuate yourself into these places, if you know what I mean. You can never become a local, but you try to kind of find out what is like the local thing to do, and then you explain that to other travelers who can then visit the similar places and also experience something that goes like beyond the tourist agenda.
I agree with that, and since the theme of the festival is belonging, that is a crucial part of not just travel writing, but traveling in general. That, you know, to feel that you belong to a place, that you're a part of it, because otherwise you become a tourist and not a traveler.
Okay, so I'll bring this conversation back to two of you. Now, like you heard in their introduction, both of them have written guidebooks, which is as objective as you can get about writing. You know, all you are doing is writing copies, 10 different objective points about a place. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've both written fiction, right, which is as subjective as it gets, you know. So how do you balance the two, and how does one feed into the other, or was it that you were sent on an assignment to do a guidebook and you gave all the objective facts and you kept all the stories for your fiction?
Yeah, that is actually the travel always. The thing is, travel always brings new experiences, new stories onto the writing table, and similarly. There's always storytelling, you know, so in travel, so the two sort of intersect, and in my case, what you said was completely true, because when I was traveling for the travel guide, and I'd come across so many interesting things, and I'd say, you know, I have to write to a format, but there's such a brilliant story.
I just showed me the time sign. So I just want you to tell me, how do you balance your writing bit? You know, so we agree that you get both bits of information, but how do you balance, you know, writing a guidebook can be, I mean, to me it can be very boring, but writing a fiction is like living in a world that you create for yourself. So how do you balance the two?
It's actually about being active and being passive. So the two sort of balance out. So in my fiction, for example, like in my novel Wanderers, all the travelogue is part historical fiction and part travelogue. So the travelogue is based a lot on things that I came across while doing the Mumbai Goa guide, because the novel is based in both Bombay and Goa. And similarly, from a sociological point of view, I mean, travel is a very we see it as leisure or pleasure, but it's actually deeply sociological. And so the whole history of migration of humankind, and so it becomes both a physical journey and a metaphorical journey. So when you're writing fiction, at least in my case, I'm pretty much sort of stuck to the desk. And time traveling also, because it's historical fiction, so it's travel at multiple levels. And at the same time, when it's travel writing, you're on the move.
Right.
So it's a balance.
Half a minute to answer.
Half a minute only. Oh, that's really good. No, see, I write detective novels and thrillers as my field of fiction. And a detective novel is not that far removed from a travel book, really. And like, for example, when I travel to foreign countries, if I go to China or Australia or to New York or wherever I go, I try to pick up like a local crime novel or thriller just to read about that place, things that are not there in the travel handbooks, and they get like a view from, if a crime writer is really good, they'll capture that place on a different level. So what happened was that, like, when I moved to Bangalore 15 years ago, I was looking for local crime novels in the bookshops a lot. But like this, at that time there was very little of crime fiction written in India or published in India. I mean, you have like some Bengali detective novels, of course, like Feluda by Shotajit Ray and Pankaj Bakshi, and there's some Tamil pulp fiction and Hindi pulp fiction published in India. And some wonderful books like Sacred Games by Vikram Chandra, which is a Mumbai crime novel. But not so many like hardly any Bangalore crime fiction at all. So I started realizing that, okay, maybe this is my calling. I should write the big Bangalore detective novel. And the detective novel essentially is what it is there's a crime or some kind of a thing in the beginning, usually a dead body or a missing person or something like that, and there's a solution at the end. And in between, the detective will have reason to travel through the city, walk down the mean streets, the back alleys, the broadways, the avenues, visit luxury hotels, shady dives, and talk to people of all classes, from the upper classes to the lower classes, and to find the clues to solving the mystery. So a detective novel is on some level not very distant from writing a travel piece, except that like you need to have a slightly coherent plot. Like in a travel piece you can be whimsical. In a detective novel, if you're whimsical, people will dismiss you very fast. So I try to be less whimsical when I do fiction and whimsical when I do non-fiction.
I would open it for questions. Yes.
How do you balance the more inane aspects of your trip with what the people would want to know? Say, for example, the reasons that you have to travel for, be it business or education, and get a whole dialogue of all the details of your trip. Like, say, for example, I could write for myself about every little detail of my trip. But how do you decide between what would another person want to know?
Well, it actually again boils down to who you're writing for, and if it's a particular magazine or if it's a travel guide. And similarly, I mean, if it's fiction, then you're not thinking about the reader. So you have to, I think, decide according to the genre. And you have, again, because this is about finding a voice, it's really about developing your own style, and eventually it becomes a part of you. It's, yeah.
Over a period of time we learn, So initially I would do I'll put everything about the trip on the blog. But having said that, I'll do a 7-day trip and write 500 words about it. But today I can do a 2-hour trip and write 5,000 words. Okay, that's how the observation has gone up. But you start sensing, you know, your interaction with your readers gives you that sense of what to write, what they want or what you want to tell them, or how it's like a conversation. I mean, at least on a blog, it's like a conversation. So you give them, they come back, you give them more. You know, half the time, I was surprised that, you know, with one of my blog posts, somebody wrote that this is not been written by you, and I had actually written it very differently because I was trying to insert an advertisement in that. That's the first time I attempted, and I was so surprised that the readers simply came back and said, "This is not you." You know, so there's a conversation on the blog, but like she said, for a magazine or for a print publication, you probably go as per a brief or as per the magazine or publications direction.
Also, like when you go to a place, you collect all that material, and that's fine. You put it in your own notebook. Like if you want to become loose chatting, you'll have a Moleskine. Otherwise, you'll do it on your phone or something like that. Anyway, I mean, you collect a lot of material, but like when you sit down to actually write the story for your magazine or whatever media you're writing for, you have to kind of find the story that this place has to tell, and just remove all the parts of information that really doesn't belong in that story, and let just retain the information that is relevant for explaining that plot to the readers, like what happened when I got there, and like what I also like to I shouldn't be telling you this, but sometimes, you know, I throw around details a little bit to make it more exciting. Just to get like that plot curve where you go towards that climax, and then at the end there'll be like some surprising twist.
Yeah, I think that's where the fiction part, you know, that intersection comes in. Like a lot of writers are also known to do that. And in my case, it's like, you know, when I'm writing fiction and where the travel comes into fiction, it's you can keep it more subtle, and you can provoke thought. Like for me, travel is a much larger thing than yourself, and it makes you feel very inconsequential. And the fact that people have traveled, no one sprouted from the soil, and people have been traveling throughout, and you don't know what your origins are, and therefore geographical boundaries change, and you know, cultural associations change within a lifetime. So to sense, you know, to sort of keep yourself, sense of self and your identity sort of linked very closely to geographical or cultural boundaries, you realize through travel that actually those are meaningless, because otherwise you will not be yourself if you do, and travel opens out, I think, a much larger.
I don't know the answer to that, but we'll take one more question. We have 2 minutes left. Yeah.
Reflect on the irony that the most popular travel guidebooks of this rather overcrowded planet is called Lonely Planet. In that sense, is traveler lonely? And how does travel change your perception of home?
Okay, I can answer that. That Lonely Planet, how did it get the name Lonely Planet is a very interesting story. They wanted to call it Lovely Planet, and there was some mistake that happened. I think you can Google for the story. Yeah, some mistake that happened that it became Lonely Planet. You know, just like Google got its name by a mistake, Lonely Planet is by mistake. So it's not meant to be Lonely Planet. But having said that, you know, we all glamorize travel, we all make it look very nice. When you actually do it, it can be a pretty lonely affair to handle, you know, especially if you're traveling all by yourself.
Though actually, if you travel alone and you are a truly lonely travel, you end up meeting a lot of people, you know. Like, it's only like if you travel in a group or together with someone else that you actually will not meet any people. But if you're alone, you are like I mentioned I wrote a story of Tellicherry in Kerala for National Geographic Travel recently, which at the end of the story, also like as a travel writer, you need a lot of luck. You need like lucky coincidences, lucky things happening to you. And there was this moment, you know, when I was sort of felt I finished with Tellicherry. I was at the bus stand, about to board the bus to leave from there, and then a drunkard staggered up to me, and he looked at me and said like, "Are you leaving Kerala?" I was standing there with my backpack, so I was obviously leaving. I said, And the only thing I could think of was saying like, I'm sorry sir, I am leaving Kerala. And then he looked at me and he said like, welcome back soon. And that was like a perfect conclusion of the story. But also it wasn't like, at moments like that you don't feel that alone when you travel, because people notice you like, here is a traveler, and there's a lot of hospitality around the world. So you're really not ever that alone.
Also, if you're actually from, if you come from an urban space, I find the, traveling alone very liberating, because you're always surrounded by crowds and it becomes a deeply personal experience when you're traveling alone. So,
I think we'll have
running out of time.
really run out of time. If you have any questions, I think any of us would be willing to take it offline with you. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you all
here.
for
Thank you,
coming.
Janhavi,
Yeah.
and thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Anuradha, for talking to us.